protest cultures today.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. We'll uncover how these movements work, how they evolve,
Right.
and the impact they have. We're using this book, Protest Cultures, a companion.
Oh, I've heard of that one.
It's got it all.
Mm.
The ideas behind protests, media use,
Yeah.
even fashion.
Really?
I know, right?
Yeah.
The chapters on symbols, how protesters use their bodies, and online protests, those are really eye-opening.
I bet.
But first things first, what exactly are protest cultures?
Good question. It's more than just marches and signs, you know? It's the shared beliefs, the symbols, the strategies, the creative ways protesters challenge what's considered normal.
Mm,
Studying them helps us see how societies change and adapt. Just think about it. Today's protests leverage fashion and the internet,
sure.
things that were unimaginable a century ago.
It's mind-blowing how much things have changed. I was reading how the book calls this the morphology of protests, like the anatomy of a movement, the parts that make it tick. Yeah.
It breaks it down into four main aspects: constructing reality, media, the domains of protest actions, and representations of protest.
Absolutely. In that first one, constructing reality, that's where you get the ideologies, identities, and narratives that shape a movement's message and bring people together. You know, like how labor unions in the U.S. back in the 40s, they used that slogan, slave labor law, to describe the Taft-Hartley Act.
Oh, yeah. I remember that. It wasn't about actual slavery, though. Right?
No, no, not at all. It was a powerful metaphor, a way to get their point across, rally people to their cause.
So it's not just the words, but the feelings they evoke. Powerful stuff.
Exactly. It definitely got people talking, thinking about the power dynamics between workers and employers. Whether it directly changed the law, well, that's up for debate. But it highlights how strategic language can be in protest.
Like a code to tap into shared values, get people moving.
That's a great way to put it. Makes you think about all the different ways movements connect with people. You mentioned earlier how protest methods have evolved. That chapter on the body as a tool for protest, that was really something. Protesters using their physical presence, making a statement.
Right.
Powerful stuff. The book mentioned it has consequences, both positive and negative.
Oh, definitely. And it's not just about marching, though that's a classic image. The suffragettes, fighting for women's right to vote, they used hunger strikes.
Wow.
Put their bodies on the line, demanding change.
Powerful, but also, wow, risky.
It was both. The book talks about the empowerment, the sense of defiance, but also the potential for violence, even trauma.
It's like their bodies become the message, strength and vulnerability all at once.
Exact.
So powerful. And then there's this whole other dimension, protest happening online. Did the book talk about that much?
It did. It argues that the internet has become a crucial battleground for protest in the 21st century.
I can see that with the speed of mobilizing people, raising awareness.
Yeah.
But there must be downsides too, right?
Definitely. Online censorship, surveillance, those are growing concerns. The book mentions laws in the UK classifying some online protests as terrorism. Raises questions about where we draw the line, what's legitimate protest versus what's considered dangerous by governments.
So the internet, it's this double-edged sword, a powerful voice, but also new vulnerabilities.
That's right.
It makes you wonder what the future holds for protest in this digital world we live in.
It certainly does.
Speaking of change, I was struck by how some methods, like strikes, have been around for ages, but they've transformed too.
Absolutely. It's fascinating how protest tactics can remain similar yet totally change at the same time. The book mentions strikes that used to be spontaneous, unregulated.
Right.
Now they're more institutionalized, controlled. Makes you wonder if they've lost some of their edge.
It's like they've been, I don't know, tamed.
Maybe. And then there are brand new forms of protest.
Oh, yeah.
Civil disobedience, which became more common in the 60s and 70s, and then its modern offspring, electronic civil disobedience using tech to disrupt. These show how people are constantly rethinking how to challenge authority. Raises the question, will these new approaches lead to lasting change? It's an open question.
It's a constant push and pull, isn't it? Figuring out what works in a world that never stops changing. And then I noticed the book pointed out how protests are designed to be seen, to be heard, almost like a performance.
That's a key insight. Protests aren't just about expressing an opinion, they're about demanding attention. That's where image events come in. Actions designed to grab the media's attention, get people talking.
Like using fashion to make a statement. I was reading about this group, Serpicanaro. They use fashion production to showcase their diversity, challenge fashion norms.
Absolutely.
It's-
Fashion
yeah.
choices, they can be a powerful form of individual expression, reflecting shared values.
Mm.
Think about wearing a certain color or symbol to show solidarity. And then there's symbolic politics, using symbols, gestures, even theatrical elements to communicate a message. Ever notice how a raised fist or taking a knee can speak volumes?
You're so right. Creating these impactful visuals that become part of a bigger story. It's not just about the words.
Exactly.
It's images, actions that stick with people. Makes you think about how effective they are in changing minds, creating real change.
It does.
Amazing how a piece of clothing, a gesture, can hold so much power. I was surprised how much the book talked about fashion. Never thought of it as such a key part of protest.
It's more common than you might think. And it's not always big organized groups. The book mentions this feminist group, Plotki Femzine. Their members are spread out in different cities.
Oh, wow.
They share fashion ideas through pictures over email.
That's incredible. Their own digital fashion network.
Exactly.
Shows how resourceful and creative these groups can be. It all comes back to how protest shapes society, something we touched on at the start. So much more to uncover. But that's it for part 1. Join us for part 2, where we'll delve into the impacts these movements have had on different parts of society. See you then. Part 2 of our deep dive. Last time we explored how protest movements are structured, the tactics, the symbolism, the art.
Yeah.
Now, I want to shift gears a little, talk about the impact these movements have had, on different parts of society. That section in the book, long-term consequences, that got me thinking.
It really is amazing how these movements spark change beyond the immediate issues. It's like throwing a pebble in a pond. The ripples just keep spreading.
Perfect analogy. One area that really jumped out at me, the impact on the workplace. The book talked about the labor movement, strikes, boycotts. They've led to some major changes in working conditions and workers' rights.
Absolutely. We take things for granted today, right? The 8-hour workday, minimum wage, the right to form unions. These were hard-won victories, decades of struggle, sacrifice, danger.
It's incredible when you think about it. These basic rights we have now, once radical demands, shows the power of collective action.
It does. It shows how protest can challenge those power dynamics between those who control the workplace and the workers, demanding a fairer share.
Right, workers coming together saying, we deserve dignity, respect, and we're not backing down.
Exactly.
And the book talked about how protest has been key in the fight for civil rights, social justice, the civil rights movement in the U.S., the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, the LGBTQ plus rights movement, examples of how protest brings real, lasting change.
And it's important to remember these movements, they didn't just happen overnight. Years, decades of work by countless people, organizing, educating, pushing for change. And they often faced incredible resistance, violence.
Makes you appreciate those who put themselves out there. It's inspiring how their struggles have led to a more inclusive and equitable society.
It's true. We've come a long way. But the fight for social justice continues. There's always more work to do. And speaking of ongoing struggles, I'm curious, how about the impact on how we view environmental issues? It's such a global concern now, and it feels like activism has been huge in bringing that to light.
It's so true. I was just thinking about the early days of the movement, when people dismissed them, hippies hugging trees,
Yeah.
but they were raising the alarm, pollution, climate change,
Right.
way before most people were paying attention.
Right.
And now, look, thanks in part to their work, these issues are at the forefront, global discussions.
The movement has come a long way. A lot of that progress, it's because of those activists willing to stand up, demand better for our planet, boycotts, protests. They found ways to get their message out there.
It shows that you don't need to be, a scientist or a politician to make a difference. Speak up, demand change. And the book touched on how important protest has been in the fight for educational justice, too. All those student-led movements, fighting for affordable tuition, more inclusive education.
Absolutely. Student activism has been a force in education for so long. The student movements of the 60s challenging the old ways, demanding a voice. And it continues today. Climate change, racial justice, LGBTQ plus rights.
It's inspiring to see young people leading the way, demanding a better future. Not just accepting things, actively working to make a change.
Gives you hope, right? That passion, that
Yeah,
commitment, they'll be shaping the world of tomorrow. And it reminds us, education, it's not just about absorbing information. It's about thinking critically,
yeah.
challenging assumptions, using your voice to make a difference. That's true empowerment.
This whole conversation has been so insightful. It's amazing to see how these movements have had an effect on so many aspects of society, workplace, environment, education. It really makes you appreciate the power of coming together, speaking out against injustice.
I agree. It's been fascinating, and I hope it's inspired everyone listening to think about the role of protest, how it shapes the world around us. But we've got more to explore. In part 3, we're going to look at some specific examples of protest movements and the impact they've had.
And we're back. Final part of our deep dive. We've come a long way, haven't we? From the structure of movements to their tactics to their impacts on things like, well, the workplace, social justice. Now, I'm excited to dig into some real-world examples, see how those ripples of change actually played out.
It's incredible how even those seemingly small, localized movements, they can have this lasting impact on society. Sometimes it's immediate, dramatic, other times it's more subtle, but it all adds to that bigger story of social change.
I was thinking about what the book said about the legacy of the civil rights movement in the U.S.
Right.
It wasn't just about, ending segregation. It sparked a wave of activism. We see it today. LGBTQ plus rights, disability rights, so many others.
A great example of that ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
Inspiring, influencing the movements that came after, the civil rights movement. It's like it created this blueprint for social change. Nonviolent resistance, using media strategically, building coalitions, powerful stuff.
And it's not just those big organizations, the marches. The book talked about everyday acts of resistance, those quiet acts of defiance, chipping away at the system, like during apartheid in South Africa.
Exactly. Think about those who refused to use segregated facilities, created those underground support networks. Art, music, spreading messages of hope. Those acts of courage, multiply that across society, that's a force for change.
Makes you realize we all have a part to play, right?
Yeah.
Creating a more just world.
Yeah.
Speaking up when something's wrong, supporting causes you believe in. Doesn't always have to be grand gestures, right?
No, not at all. Those small everyday acts, they're important. They shift the culture, change minds, create a space where bigger changes can happen. And speaking of shifting the culture, what about the environmental movement? It's a global issue now. It feels like activism has been key in bringing that to the forefront, making people aware.
For sure. I was thinking about those early environmentalists. Back then, a lot of people thought they were just, well, hippies hugging trees. But they were the ones raising the alarm, pollution, climate change, long before most people cared. Now, thanks to them, these issues are center stage, global conversations.
It's come a long way. And a lot of that is because of those activists pushing for change. Boycotts, protests, they've gotten their message out there.
You don't have to be a scientist or a politician to make a difference.
Nope.
Just speak up, demand change.
Mm-hmm.
The book talked about educational justice, too.
Mm-hmm.
All those student movements, affordable tuition, inclusive education.
Student activism, it's been a force in education forever. Think about the 60s, students challenging traditions, demanding a voice. And it still goes on today. Climate change, racial justice, LGBTQ plus rights.
Inspiring to see young people taking charge, right? Demanding a better future. Not just accepting things, actively trying to make a change.
Gives you hope, right? Seeing that passion, knowing they'll be shaping the world. Education is not just about taking in information, it's about thinking for yourself, challenging what you're told, using your voice to make things better.
This whole deep dive has been eye-opening. Protest, it's not just about anger, demonstrations, it's about collective action, the bravery to speak truth to power, believing that a better world is possible.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's been great exploring these ideas with you. Hopefully our listeners are feeling that sense of hope, understanding just how vital protest is in shaping the world.
I'm feeling it. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the heart of protest cultures. It's been amazing. And you know what? I think we'll be coming back to these ideas again and again. Thanks for listening, everyone.